Hello, everyone, and welcome to This Week in Hospitality Marketing live show number 450. Yes, tick, tick, 450. We're well into our 10th year of weekly broadcasting on our hospitality TV station, which is located on all your smart TVs, Apple TV, Google TV, Amazon TV, Roku TV, Samsung, LG, whatever, even on Twitch, your gaming consoles. Just look for the Hospitality Channel. It's a channel much like Netflix. The live show is always on the free side of that. There is a paid gateway for any more further content if you would like that. And also for those that are watching us simulcasted on Facebook, multiple pages there. LinkedIn, which is only one, my profile page, which is all that LinkedIn allows. X, YouTube, multiple channels there as well. Thank you for all the associations, organizations, companies, and so forth that have broadcast and continue to broadcast our live show. Thank you to everyone that is watching us worldwide. We're in 209 countries. We translate this to 11 languages, especially on the replays. And for everybody that watches us in odd time zones, we do recast the show at 11:30 a.m. Sydney, Australian time for our APAC friends, 11:30 a.m. Wednesday morning, London time for our EU and Mideast friends. But we still get quite a large number of people from around the world that watch us live at very odd hours. And thank you very much for doing that. So I'm your host, Lauren Gray. As I mentioned, the topic today was one that I've struggled with in some context because we have been talking a little bit about data usage, the evolution of GA4. I know those are persistent conversations we have, and we are talking about marketing, hospitality marketing. And data has turned into a very critical component of what we do as hospitality marketers. We have a peer group called Hospitality Club, Hospitality Marketing Club to be exact, hospitalitymarketing.club to be more exact, in which it's a peer level group. A missing component in most of our lives. We either are the only person in our organization that's doing this work, or we are only working with a vendor who tailors most of their answers related to their service profile. And sometimes we just have basic questions, sometimes embarrassing, simple questions, and at least they sound like they're embarrassing, which really no question is embarrassing to ask. It's just, what do you think? And sometimes talking you through things, and you miss this without having a collaborative network of people to talk to. If you talk to your coworkers who are not in the space that you're in, you get the glassy-eyed, drooly off the side of the mouth looks. They're trying to be polite, but they have no clue what you're talking about. So our peer group is really excellent in working through stuff, talking through stuff. We have live weekly conversations. We have live weekly Q&As. We have an active community board. People dialogue back and forth. They share and help with each other. They end up finding services that they didn't know existed from other resources and so forth. But that's not the real purpose of the club. It helps when people can talk to people and find out better vetted solutions than maybe what they're currently having, talk through some of the issues they're having, listen to people that empathize with what they're doing. So that's the plug for the Hospitality Club. But from that conversation, a lot of what we talk about is the implementation of data in our marketing strategy decisions. Historically, marketing has been an art, a finesse, an awareness, an empathy, a feeling of knowing whether you're doing it right, doing it wrong, and of course, the production therefrom. You may have a wonderful feeling of what you're doing is correct, and yet it misses the mark. It doesn't produce what you thought it would produce. So my topic today, long lead in for actually a very short statement, is educating the educated, how critical thinking is the next step. The reason why I brought this as a topic for discussion is because we have gone through an evolutional process. We're always evolving as to how we do things, what tools we can use for what we're doing, how effective they are, channels that change, values of channels that change. We're constantly in a state of flux when it comes to how we successfully do marketing for hospitality. As an industry, we're pretty entrenched when it comes to the modality of what we do, in the sense of we provide hospitality services, a place to stay, a place to eat, transportation values, amenities to enjoy. That core aspect of our industry remains intact. Diversification happens, but the core purpose of it, the heart of the servant, remains intact. Our ability to communicate with people and what they use to find out about us is constantly evolving. With that, it turns into a perspective of trying to understand what's the better way of doing things. We know that successful ROI, return on investment, is a measurement that our people that we work with and for hold us accountable for, in the sense, if I give you X money Tell me what Y dollars I get back or Y monies I get back. That relationship, unfortunately, we've discussed this on the show a few times, being the first and sole only metric diminishes the opportunities of channels that can't derive that same good value that people say is a successful program. Case in point, social. We've known for almost since the inception of social, social is not a strong direct channel. It provides incredible value for all the other channels, and it does have some direct channel value, but in comparison to other channels like paid campaigns and so forth, it is by far the weakest cousin of them all. However, as we've made the analogy many times, it's like the amplifier to an electric guitar, your electric guitar being your product. Social makes it sound good. Social amps up what you can do. It augments what you do on so many other things, your paid campaigns, your web development, and so forth and so on, because it is the soft dialogue of engagement, the upper funnel where ROI doesn't have a true metric of value that is appreciated. There is no real strong ROI in upper funnel. And what we mean by this is when you're talking to the masses who have yet to decide what they're interested in, how they're interested in, or if they have any action of what they're looking at before they even get into a level of education of defining what they're interested in particular. To play in that space of awareness, brand awareness, destination awareness is expensive because there's no relationship of what you did to what you get from it from a measurable way historically. Now, as time continues forward and our tools continue to improve as they do, and resources become more available and more integrations between these things, we're beginning to get more data to understand the cause-effect relationships, the string relationships. There's differences between those. Cause and effect is kind of polar. String relationships are more attribution related. And that's where we get into more of our current discussions when it comes to data. From July of last year forward, GA4 is now the default of the predominant way of collecting data because Google was strategic in making sure that everybody got their free, helpful analytics, their Urchin, their Universal Analytics, UA Analytics. And so because of that, Google is the most propagated tracking process that most people have. There are other platforms, Adobe's AWS and programs and what they do and so forth. And there are others, but most of the time for real benefit and ease of integration with so many other things that you do to promote hospitality in a marketing sense, it's the easiest and best just to use Google. So we're now in a GA4 world, which means that everything is getting tracked, and it's up to us to decide what it is we're interested in seeing of all that data that's being tracked. That is the new paradigm that we're now in compared to previously to GA4. Universal Analytics was you had to choose what you wanted to track, so it would tell you what it is that you were looking at. We now track everything, so we can ask anything to a certain degree, which we've talked about on shows before. But to that end, how we do marketing is a little bit of a touch and a feel, a gut feeling, an initiative that says, man, this just feels right, so forth and so on. And that's the human nature of us. We do rely on numbers. We rely on statistics. We rely on production. We rely on things. But in the barrage of the first wave of big data, remember when that was such a buzzword, big data? And the definition of big data. Well, yeah, it's big data. It's everything. It's all the stuff that we're now being able to track. Weather data. Weather's happening. We have that data. We can give all that traffic data. We have that data. Political affinities. We have that data. Demographic abilities. We have that data. Behavioral. We have data. What do we do with all this data? How do we make it all talk to each other? That was the nascence of what big data was. It was an overwhelming perspective of what to do with all this. And for the better part of 2 years, it was the buzz of any conference you went to. It was literally injected into every topic headline of somebody walking on stage. Big data and you. How to use big data? Big data, is it usable? Blah, blah, blah. Anyway. It's going to be hot coffee. It's raining outside today, so coffee's good. And it's cooling off, which is nice, being in Florida. Anyway, so we've now gone through where the data is still big and getting bigger. We have gone through the means of collecting and storing it. We've had those conversations. And we've gone through the ways of identifying things that we find interesting in the data. That's great. But we're still applying our old perspective of what to do with the data in a way that is prohibitive for us moving forward. And what do I mean by this? I would say that we're lazy, but in fact, we're just creatures of habit. We like seeing the same things, or seeing as things change, them have some reference to similarities to each other. Okay, um, as time moves forward. I think we all hear from the generations of our families the way the life that they lived at the age that we were, or that we are, that they were at that time, how different the world is. We make fun of the fact that, at my age, it's like I grew up where cellular phones did not exist. They so existed later in my life. There was a time where you had to decide what pictures to take with film because you only had, if you had a big roll of film, 36 pictures to take. Okay. And oftentimes less because it was expensive to have a 36 picture roll. And you brought them to a place to get developed and so forth and what have you. Now pictures are used for everything, reminders and everything else like this, and trackability. Where was I? I don't remember. I don't have, unless I wrote it down in a journal, I was at such and such a place. I don't know where I was at, but now we have means of technology that tells us all this kind of stuff. So we have this progression of how we use data. However, we as an industry haven't changed, and we have this familiarity. We like looking at certain numbers because that's what we grew up with the numbers that exist. Prior to 2001, nobody talked about traffic to a website really much. We were a minority of conversationalists. We were very few people that were actually doing anything online for hospitality. I was there. And it was all about all the traditional legacy ways of doing marketing for hotels, your magazines, your newspapers, your roadside banner ads, radio, dare say TV if you're a large enough brand to do it, because that was the only option you had was national broadcasting. Books of guides and so forth, rate cards and brochure racks, and your Chamber of Commerce brochure rack, and those were the more fundamental ways of doing marketing. There was fewer choices, and that's what you had. And good salespeople on phone calls, and getting a Rolodex that had people's numbers that you called, and there was somebody on the other end because that was their phone number, a landline. Anyways, and we started looking at things like traffic to your website. Why is that important? Well, because we want to know how many people actually saw our website. We quickly learned that most of the people that saw our website didn't do anything about it. 95% and up, okay, didn't do anything about coming to our website. They didn't stay long either. We started learning about what were bounce rates. What's bounce rate? Bounce rate means they came to your website and in less than 7 seconds they were gone. Bounced. They didn't even have enough time to look at anything. Well, they looked, but they looked just enough to realize they didn't go to the right place. We learned about engagements in the sense of clicks. How many people went to a page views, okay? Very early on, 2001, to be really historically accurate, we talked about hits. How many hits did you have? And you used to have a little counter on the bottom of your website, show how popular your website was, because people don't know how to find websites. So the fact that you could count people that saw your website mean that you were being successful compared to other people that had no means to tell anybody unless they put a sign in front of their building that says, this is our website, okay? That they would know where that website name was. And there was actually books that you bought in a bookstore that was like telephone guides that had websites addresses. And I kid you not. I know, old geezer. Anyways, but those numbers became familiar, okay? Traffic to the website, how many people went to the booking engine when we finally got booking engines, and how many people went to the booking engine. So how many people went to the website, boom. How many people did something on the website, clicked on something. And how many of those people went to the part that was our booking engine, okay? Still not yet having bought anything, but they went as far as to look at something. And then how many of those booked? Oh, wow. Now when we get to be able to do advertisement, we advertise. So how many people came to our website from our ads versus just found our website? So organic versus paid. How many people of those people did the same thing? How many people went and did something? Okay, good. How many people went to the booking engine? That's good. How many people bought from that? Great. So of that, what they bought, how does that compare to how much I spent to get them there? ROI. And so on and so on, we have progressed through our data usage. Old habits are hard to let go. And we still look to those numbers as a comforting way of understanding the mass amount of big data that we're being presented with now, all these things. And as I help clients, and I think, and not to we talk about this, but just the service providers, we fix things for companies and so forth, opaquely, transparently, whatever. We go in and we help address what it is that's creating dysfunction into their organization or their dysfunctional marketing, what have you. And some of the predominant things we see persistently is reports that don't get used, but they get generated because that's the way it's always been done. And reports we've talked about is comparative analytics, which is the evaluation of reports. So these reports get generated. It's time consuming to generate these reports. The reason why they're still generated is because that's the way they've always been done. But then when you ask and press people that gets the reports, what do they do with it? You cull away the largest percentage of people that do nothing with it. Say 80%, because that's a fair low number of people that look at a report and have it in case they get asked for it. That's what its purpose is. Literally to have it in case somebody asks for it or asks about it. That, yes, I have it. I'll go look if you need me to. For the people that actually do look at it, they look at it very particularly. Certain things, at certain times, for certain numbers. Think of it very similar to when people get STAR report, Smith Travel Research reports. They look at tab 4, metaphorically, it used to be literally. Paper report opens it up and you look at page 4. And then you get online, tab 4. And now, the reports look different in different formats, but typically the number that everybody wants to look for that gets the report, log in or get it, is tab 4 RevPAR. How is my RevPAR compared to who I said I was competing to in the market? Because that number is the number that is looked at by your superiors to know whether or not they need to chastise you or praise you. Hey, look, our RevPAR went down. What's going on? Well, we had this, and you begin to explain the process of why RevPAR had the variance it did. By the same token, you can be praised. Wow, your RevPAR is looking great. Your occupancy is looking great. Your ADR. And what are those numbers? Those are numbers in comparison to people that you've designated you want to be compared to. So there's a lot of political leverage with that as well. But anyways, that's how we've looked at and used familiar numbers. Well, here we are where we are now, where all this big data is being streamed in. And the first thing I see from a lot of people is, one, they have no accuracy of the data. They're not tracking it correctly. They're thinking that it just magically transitioned from what it used to be doing to what it's doing now, and the same numbers mean the same numbers, and so forth. And it's not, because GA4 is, as we've discussed many times, not the same as UA. So for that reason, the numbers don't match. When you start looking over year between what UA is versus GA, you see those don't match anymore. That seems like something's different. Also, too, in GA, you have a durability of data which only goes back 14 months unless you've provided a means of storing your own data, which we've had a show about with BigQuery and talking about how to set up the account and store it so you have more usage of the full amount of data later. It doesn't mean all the data goes away after 14 months. It just means a lot of the reporting data goes away after 14 months. A lot of it gets culled down. So you get less data to use, and you also get a higher sampling of the data that stays, because Google doesn't want to pay for the storage or accommodate the storage for you if you're not paying for it. So it'll keep what it needs, but it's not going to keep what you need. And it's going to highly sample the data, meaning it's going to take a portion of what you're doing in the sense of relevance of what all the whole data represents. Sampling, if you're not familiar with sampling, it's a math process. But anyways, to that end, a lot of people try to translate all this data that they now have in the same familiar terms that they have been used to. And we've stuck to this visual perspective of a funnel, meaning it was very large mouth at the top. Here's everybody that we are engaged with, okay? And that funnel numerically narrows as people go from discovering us to deciding what they want to know about and educating themselves. And from education, they go down into more and more segments that people pride themselves in always thinking they found a new one, down to basically a conversion point, which is called ZMA, zero moment of transaction, where they've gone through this entire process to the point of purchasing something with you. And those numbers go from a huge number to a very, very small number. And we've pointed out many, many times that people are very much focused on that narrow gap just above the transaction point, because that is not wasting money talking to a lot of people that end up not purchasing from you, but are addressing the ability to convert the people that are most interested in buying something from you. That's where you see that highest density of marketing is very close to the bottom where the transaction actually occurs, because that is the highest opportunity bang for the buck. That's where ROI has been both a blessing and a curse, because if everything is based on just the metric of ROI, your focal point is myopic to just above that moment of transaction, always, because that's where your ROI has the purity of best value. As you go up in the funnel, your ROI descends to a point of just obscurity. There's no real tangible connection to what you're spending to anything that you're producing, per se. Data's gotten better. And what I mean is, we don't live in a linear world as we often think. Marketing for us goes in the progression of step 1 to step 2, step 2 to step 3, on and on and on until moment of transaction. Reality for us, and we make jokes about it, but it's true, is like we're a kid on a 4-year-old kid on a sugar high, looking at a toy store. We're everywhere. when we get online to purchase anything, may have the best intent in getting and going to what we're interested in purchasing. But we know we go off here, we go off there, we go off there, kind of like my show does sometimes, tangents. Where we just it's more of a spherical, it can go any which direction. So the value of doing a progressive linear perspective of transactions is very, very flawed. Much like when I used to give grief in my economics class in college, way back to my economics teachers, I always used to rib the fact that we would always create a predication of in economics to look at something economic wise, particular aspect of ratios or cause and effect, that everything else in the world, even though it doesn't happen this way, is not relevant to that we're taking the ambiguity of all the other factors that could influence this single correlation and creating it artificially suspended. And we're going to just look at these two cause and effect items in an artificial bubble that doesn't exist about things that can't be frozen. It's kind of what we're doing with our marketing if we think of it in a linear sense. We are trying to assess what we did or what a guest did from here to here, when in fact there's a whole lot of other stuff between those 2 points that were also a part of their process. So in comes in a process that Google introduced to us back when UA was still around, called attribution modeling. When they took away our keywords, because we were fixated on what words were being used, so we must use those words in our ads so that they use them in the SERP results, so that we get in front of these people, because those are the words they use to get search engine results. Google went through this whole transitional process of showing that it was about the purpose of the words, the intent of the words, and that it took a smarter understanding of when using words in a certain sequence, the value of each word as it relates to the expression of what they're looking for, long tail search. I'm not going to bore you with the history of that. We've gone through that over the years of the show as to what this progression meant. But what it means now is we don't use keywords or have the data from keywords back in times past. We were given attribution model. What is attribution modeling? It means what happened between when we first became aware of this person to when they ended up doing something as a conversion. And again, it is not linear, but we have certain channels of things that we do know that a guest, future guest, a purchaser, a customer, has access to: social channels, paid ad campaigns, alternate media, organic data, blogs, websites, so forth and so on. All these things are places that people go through in their discovery process, back to the two-dimensional visual of a funnel, the early stages where they're not sure about what they want to do, not sure about where they want to go, not sure about anything. They're trying to discover things. They're not out to purchase something right away. They're out to be aware of things to know what they might be interested in purchasing. Okay, which then goes to the next stage, which is once they begin to get a better idea of what they've discovered is what they're interested in, they want to educate themselves about, is this what I want? Why would I want this compared to the other thing I'm interested in their discovery process? That whole process, okay, gets related to what channels they use, where do they find their resources of information. There's a time distance, a timeline that's associated with it. And we got introduced to terms and things that we talked about with attribution of last click attribution, which meant that for us to assign a value of what we spent to acquire this person's purchase, the last thing they did that made them buy is what we're going to give all the credit to. And we've talked about the analogy of a basketball team, that if somebody is always the one that shoots the basket, but the whole team keeps giving them the ball, then that person gets credited for all the points that were done and the team did nothing. When in fact, the whole reason why the person was able to score the points is for what all the rest of the team did. Now, taking that same analogy, we began talking about other attributions. First touch attribution, meaning what was the first thing that engaged this person that they ended up buying something with us? Because that should be given the credit, because that's what got the whole thing started. Well, that's a lot like the person putting the ball into the basketball court. The first person that gets the ball gets credit for all the points that the rest of the team scores. That didn't mean that they actually threw the ball in the basket at all. It just means that they were the first one that grabbed the ball. Well, that just seems like there's flaws with that as well. It has value, okay, but it's not a clear picture. Giving full credit to one or another is not really the thing. Now, the one thing I will say that is a familiar, comfortable number for us is last click attribution. That's how a lot of universal analytics were set up. That was the first thing we originally were able to track, is what happened, what brought us to business. This paid campaign button sold us this room. That all praise to that ad campaign, because that's the one that made them buy this thing. That was our first level of tracking that was allowed to us. So we got very enamored with that. And that's been kind of our gold standard perspective since we started having that data. Since then, more data availability of what they've touched is more trackable data, okay, is to knowing that they came from another source, knowing that they touched another source, knowing that they came to our website. All of that stuff is now other data that we were able to assign. Now, in Universal Analytics, we had to actually ask those questions. We had to have goals, okay, and elements of tracking that said, okay, I want to track everybody that comes to our website, clicks on this button on this page, and books. So we know that there's a value to them getting to this page. That was Universal Analytics modality, session-based tracking of, I want to know what this link, this whole string, okay, of people coming here and going here and clicking this. I want to know those people. That's how we used to do Universal Analytics. So in attribution, we began to learn, Google forcing us to really, what the different attribution models were. Then we began to realize there was other ways of looking at this attribution modeling, which was frequency. How often did they go back to the same place? How many times did they come to our website or hit an ad or use social? So frequency had a factor. Like, well, it seems like rather unfair that we give last click attribution to our website when we now know that this person hit our Facebook page a dozen times before they went to our website and bought. It seems to me like they educated themselves on everything about our social and simply came to our website when they decided they wanted to purchase. So the website was really just the vehicle of conversion. It wasn't the whole value of what we spent. Like if I spend $100 on social, okay, and I gave all the credit to the website on last click, then I got no ROI on social. It's like, well, but yet frequency shows that it was used an awful lot. The reverse is true. If I spend all this money on building my website and I spent $100 on social and it didn't include the website's conversion, then I'm going to sit here going, well, social, developed all this business, but it wasn't the click on social that actually converted. So we learned about frequency. We learned about time decay. What do we mean by this? Well, they click on something, I say our social, very early on in the discovery of us, but never used it again. Well, how valuable was that compared to all the other things that they did up to the point of converting? It contributed because it added to the whole attribution string, but it was never used again. So that time decay meant that if it had happened shortly after they had touched their social page, then that means, oh, it had a high value. They went to our social page, they found what they're interested in, they come to our website and they booked. But if they did this, went to social, and then a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks later, they just go to our website or from a variety of other places they went to and just go to the website to book, how valuable was that social? It had value, but not as much because over time that value diminished. Okay. And on and on. There are other attribution variables. Let's just put it that way. Attribution string variables. So out of all this is big data. We now have a better perspective of looking at this data. Google still gives us options. We still have user data, which is tracking the individual user through the experience that they have into the point of conversion. We have session-based data, which is keeping track of them as they interact with us and then come back and interact with us again. That session stays and we track it through the process. And then we have database data, which is actually Google's little black box of keeping track of what it can keep track of and we can't, of all the things outside of our website and everything else. And it assigning a value to the things that touched as a correspondence of how it sees how much that channel played in the contribution of the conversion, whether it's frequency, time decay, first touch, last touch, on and on and on. Google has an algorithmic calculation as to it knowing it did these things, how much, and from its perspective, it sees this. Okay. So why am I bringing all this about educating the educated and where critical thinking is the next step? Because what we're doing now in our reporting process is taking that data and putting it into even more dense reports. Here's a spaghetti chart. Spaghetti chart's all the lines and squigglies over a bar, that like a stock market report looking thing. And a pie chart. Here's proportionate volume, value, whatever way the pie chart's represented, but it's visually supposed to show you how much of one thing is compared to how much of something else. Bar graphs. Oh, this bar is taller or longer than this bar. This was this much. Visually trying to condense some of this data into some visual perspective of this is this compared to that. Then there's the forever charts. Here's my column of data. Here's my separation of data, north-south axis, east-west axis, or XY axis, wherever we want to look at. Variations to show that this date of this, the row, here's all the things that happen in these columns. Or in these channels, here's all the things that happen in a sequence that we want to divide and separate from. All of that means that us as a industry professional have to maintain an understanding of cause and effect and string relationships. When you're looking at these reports, and I'm saying reports being static because dashboards and things like this are more dynamic. You can change the dates, you can change what you're looking at in contrast and comparison. They're highly valuable in researching things and looking at variations of the data in a way to answer a question that you are asking. Okay. Reports are just that. Here's the report. End of the month report, which 90% of you all get. Here's my end of the month report, and it's a static report. This is my traffic. This is how many people went to my booking engine. No. Here's everybody that touched my website. Here's everybody that did something on my website. Here's everybody that went to my booking engine. Here's everybody the revenue from the booking engine, and that's the conversion value of this. And this is my total engagement and so forth. And nice numbers that we're familiar with: conversion values, click rates, click-through rates, CTRs. ROAS, return on ad spend. Here's all my channels that contributed all that information. Here's my paid ad Google campaigns. Here's my paid Bing campaigns. Here's my paid social campaigns. Here's my organic social. Here's my organic website. On and on and on. Okay, CRM. Here's what they did in the sense of all the contribution. This is how they're broken apart. This is how much we spent versus how much we made per the channel on our attribution string, so that we know that this spend created this much money, so forth. That's the numbers we're comfortable with out of familiarity of how we've done our data up to date. And our reports, to be more prettier, and that's a word, and more smarter, we add colors and dimensions. Darker colors means a bigger number, lighter color means lighter numbers, red means bad, green means good. Whatever, we keep stuffing into these reports to try to highlight the correlations of the numbers in a way that the reader can say, oh, this is what I should pay attention to first. This is a big number here. This one, it's darker, it's red, it's green, whatever. And what happens is it takes time that we, as professionals in the industry, tend to have less and less of. If you ask any person, and when I used to run properties, I would tell you that the thing that is the bane is the required reports that corporate or brand or anybody else above us persistently ask for, that were either repetitive, unnecessary, or we didn't see a value usage of it because we took so much time making the reports, we ended up doing less work actually generating what the reports were talking about. That's always a complaint. Corporate on the other side. In order for us to be effective, we need to understand granularly the data of what the property is doing so that we have better informed information to make better decisions. Problem is, all of those things take time. It takes time making the reports, and it takes time understanding the reports. The problem with understanding the reports is understanding your purpose of the cause and effect of the data or the string correlation of the data in such a way that you can actually act on it. That's why so many reports get put on a shelf as soon as they're given, because until somebody kicks you and says there's a problem, or until somebody pats you on the head and say, great job, the report doesn't have a lot of value for you if it's not changing what you're doing every day. That's not a good value report. A good value report is it gives you information to know what you need to do that day. And that means a report isn't the actual solution, because a report is static. A dashboard is actionable. You go in, you see your current numbers, you see your correlations, you've been actually doing certain things, ad campaigns and or strategies or content dumps or CRM email sends or whatever, and you go into the data to see what's happening with what you're doing so that you can understand whether or not it's going the way you planned with the goals that you've set, the KPIs, we've talked about a lot, or whether it's not. And if you have to make corrections and changes to this. Now, this is on multiple levels. One is from a property perspective, corporate level, from the property's perspective in general, ownership, corporate, management company, whatever. There's an awareness of what's happening and what they're doing about it. From a vendor's level, it's about how they're managing, mitigating, and operating. They need to be consistently looking at the data to know that what they're doing is what they told the client was going to happen in the framework of what they expected. And if it's not, it's their responsibility to let the client know that something isn't going according to plan, good or bad. Hey, wow, we thought it was going to be this good. It's much better. Those are wonderful conversations. Hey, this is not living up to our thresholds that we said we expected from this. We're going to be making these changes. Just so you know, unless there's a pre-authorization required, we're going to make these changes because this is the guidelines we told you we're going to do. If it didn't hit this, we're going to do this. That's what we're doing. That's where dashboards have high value. But going back to this data, educating the educated and critical thinking is being important. In our current world, we're getting infused with a whole new level of functionality. And I'm not beating the buzzword of AI, but AI is becoming a part. Now, AI is an elusively understood thing. A lot of times, what people call AI is really machine learned high algorithmic functions. It's not really artificial intelligence as it is a well thought out string of mathematical formulas that create conditional relationships based on the data that they're given, thresholds and values that says if this happens to this becomes this, take that number, use it to this, that number makes this number change to this, whatever. It's a mathematical function. All said and same, these tools are coming infused into our softwares and coming infused into our availabilities. And they're becoming better at taking large amounts of that big data we were talking about and translating it now into a usable means. So, what do I mean by this? All these familiar numbers of who came to my website, who acted on my website, who went to my booking engine, how many of those people bought something, how much did they buy compared to how much did I spend, or how much, compared to the people and so forth, are all still familiar, comfy, warm, cozy, cup of coffee on a fireplace kind of numbers. It's the numbers that people continually, persistently want in the reports. I don't care how much other numbers and dashboards and crap you put into my report, make sure those numbers are available. They want to know what the revenue pace is in the sense of how much revenue am I making? Whether it's a report, whether it's a dashboard, they want to know what the revenue number is. If you ask them the relevance of that, they really don't know what the number was supposed to be. They just know whether it's good because there's a little green arrow that says it's more revenue or it's growing or your conversions are up or your ROI is up. And those numbers are artificially, or those credentials of color selection and arrow indications are factors that agencies or your own team put on that to indicate that when you're looking at this, this is good. Red is bad. Arrow down, But in the real world of using numbers, that's not the case. Red could be heated activity. Green could be cooled activity. Arrow down could be loss of cost. And green up could be increase of cost. And you can flip the colors, which will really freak people out. We did that once, and people were like, the red number's going up. What's that mean? That means your cost is going up. That's bad. That's why it's red. No, make it green. Comfort and familiarity play a lot in how reports get used. My process of critical thinking in the final half of my topic for today is about we have to leapfrog this report process. We have right now our 2024 goal for a lot of our engagements with our clients and so forth is to take the first thing we did last year was to create accurate data, that we're tracking accurately data. We know what percentage of everything we're getting. We have points of truth data. We know where our sources of data are. We know what we're comparing ourselves against. We know what we're tracking or what we've defined as what we want to know about tracking. We've defined how much we're storing all the data to know what we're going to be doing with it as we create new ways of interpreting it, on and on and on. This year is about creating an understanding of that data. And that means we have to look at the data as to who's using it. And we've broken it down into three simplistic. There's more than this, but there's three simplistic categories. Those people that have the data for data's sake, those people that have the data for discovery, and those people that have the data for decisions. It's three categories. 90% and up of the people are in the first category, having data for data's sake. They have the report, they get the report, they'll look at the report, they look at certain things in the report perhaps, if at all, but they have it in case they're asked about it. That gets shelved, that gets placed, it's in their email folder. They have it, they put it in their own selected folders. So they can go back and look at it, especially if things begin to creep up. They're going to go back and look and see if there's something that said that they should have looked at it sooner. Then you have the people that answer to everybody else that have to dig into the data a little bit more. They have to work the numbers a little bit. They have to understand the correlations. They have to understand why this is happening at a deeper level than just a reported number. Like, okay, so what inventories are we selling the most of? What days are trending heavier on our traffic? X and X and X and X and X and X. Those people, a lot more granularity, a lot more functionality. That's where the dashboard functions and correlations in dashboards and the reinterpretation of using dashboards and how you look at the data is very valuable. Those are the people that really grind the number a lot. I like to say revenue managers are in this category, but oftentimes I'm finding that they tend to just skim it off the shoot from the hip mentality. They have a feel. This is what they used to do. This is how they do it. They figure by pulling this lever, the light goes on. So as long as the light keeps going on, the pulling the lever is good, but they don't realize that the lever is broken. Then you have the third category of people, and those are the people that have to make decisions. Those are the people that just need to be notified. Let me know when I need to know something. Tell me that our spending is up beyond what we thought it would be. There's a notification that gets sent. Tell me our revenue went up more than we expected. When a notification sent. Letting them know to take a moment to make a choice. Is that number important for me? Well, that's what we were expecting. It's a little faster than we thought, so no problems. Don't have to do anything. Or, oh, wow, that jumped up. I should ask somebody, the people that grind the numbers a little bit more, why did this number jump up? They don't need to see massive charts. They've been given massive charts because that's the only way to present the data is like, here's the green arrows, here's the red arrows, here's the big numbers, here's all these bars and spaghettis and pie charts and everything else. Be overwhelmed because that's what it's for. Okay. To now, okay, that's what I need to know and don't need to worry about that. Good. Oh, that I do need to find out why. Boom. Oh, that's good. No, don't, stop that campaign immediately, whatever. That notification process. And that's the three generalized categories we're looking at doing for this year. The idea of how we handle what we're doing is fundamentally changing at an incredible pace. I had this conversation with a dear friend of mine, Tim. I said that agency work now is really going to go past the functionality of doing what agencies do: set up ad campaigns, run ad campaigns, create monitoring services, do reporting, dialogue about strategies about what budgets to be spent for where and when based on what business levels are required. That's all great. That's going away in time, and probably sooner than I think, and faster than I expect. Because the modality of getting it done is getting more and more automated. We talked about it in, I think, last week's show, weeks before, PMAX, TravelMax, things like this, where the functionality of doing things is getting much more efficient. It doesn't do a better job. It doesn't do a great job. It does a job. But the ability to diversify your campaign strategies, the ability to aggregate the data is benefiting dramatically from these processes being implemented. Your ability to bring to market immediate changes in your campaign strategy, the ability to bring to market immediate content changes in your products, in your modalities, your ability to generate that content, your ability to making videos for yourself where you didn't have videos made already, image ads that you didn't have image ads made already, text and headers and content and call to actions that you didn't already have made. That efficiency factor is dramatically improving. So the bandwidth requirement of agencies is going to dramatically decrease, or at least the validation of charging for that. What really begins to come out of that is the critical thinking strategy related to what you do with all that. How do we take all this data that we have in dashboards, that we have in reports, that we have in our usabilities of our channels and so forth, and translate that into what do we do with it? Because out of all of this automation, creation, and capabilities, the human factor that always goes to the gut feeling, the weird feeling, the feeling good feelings, and all those other things. I'm not saying gut feeling rules the day, but we as humans are communicating with humans with mechanical means. I'm not out on the side of the road with a cardboard sign saying buy XYZ hotel. The days of roadside signs still exist, but they have near little fractional impact as to what they used to have. The reliance on them anyway. Ours is all electric. Computer screens and phones and what have you are all based. I should put that in power charger while I'm thinking about it. As to our means of communication, those go dark, we go dark. But through that process of being able to create what's needed for what channel we want people to see it on is critical. And that is speeding up and getting better. But you still need critical thinking. And that is the understanding of the strategy of what you're doing for the purpose of what you're doing it for. What is it your conclusion of doing this for? Understanding that the message still has to be in the inception from you as to what are we trying to do for the people that we're trying to get to. And there is a huge amount of help and resource with the technology we now have to help us better define all that. I went through a seismic shift. I think I mentioned this now almost 20 shows ago. One of my dear team member friends, Aaron, was talking to me about how GA4 was no longer based on analytics, but based on audience building, and analytics was a byproduct. And that when approaching guests and the formatting of strategies, okay, critical thinking like we're talking about, looking at who you're looking to sell to is not your first step anymore. You're looking for people that act and do what you want them to do and act like, with clicking on things or being interested in certain things or reacting to certain things. And from that, you build up the audiences of those people doing that to wanting more people that are like them that will do that. And through that process, you discover the personas of them. So it's an inversion rather than coming up with personas and then targeting based on your persona decision, which is basically, I wouldn't say hit and miss and guess, but it is a lot of intuitive analysis of what you think. Even though there's a lot of data to drive some of the help with that, it's still a one over the other choice that you're making. Brown eyes, blue eyes, red hair, brown hair, whatever. You're still arbitrarily deciding what you think is more relevant to your persona build. Here, it's just the opposite. You build your audiences through what they're already doing and looking for more audiences that are similar to doing the same thing. And from that, you have become a better understanding of the persona of the persons that are in that audience. That was a huge flip the coin perspective change for me. I still sometimes struggle with, because the first thing I do, old school approach, is okay, who are we looking at here? Stop that. What is the action we're looking here for? Okay. And it's not as simple as just saying they clicked a book. It's not, because you know that there is 1,000 different reasons why people stay at your hotel. Transitory between point A and point C, and you're the point B. You're the destination. You're the one that they're brand loyal to. You're the one that has the cool rooms with the refrigerators. You're the one that has rooms that allow dogs. Whatever it is, there's 1,000 reasons why people pick to stay with you. So making one assumption is not a conclusive value. So to that end, understanding that you're looking at developing that critical thinking as you become more aware of the people you're dialoguing with. How does what you have interact with what you think is the best way of doing it? The tools that we have, the data that we have becomes more relevant the better question you ask. The better, if you know the end of the answer best, then you can format the question that will give you that answer. That's how I always approach surveys. I don't approach surveys of asking whatever question I want. Instead, I always start a survey with understanding what would be the answer I want. And if so, how will I be able to, what question will give me that answer? Because that's the answer I can use. So how can I frame a question or a series of questions, a progression of questions, or whatever it is? How do I get to this end point of this is the information that I get that I want? How do I actually get that? The same goes with our marketing strategy, critical thinking. What do I want at the end game? Well, of course I want sales, but I want sales that are sustainable, lifetime value. I just don't want single acquisition. I want it based upon the demand factors that are relevant to me for that time zone. The people that come to me in spring don't come to me in summer, or if they do, they're different, or they're different mix. They come to me in winter differently. They come to me for certain events that don't come for other events. That come for certain holidays. They don't come for certain holidays. It's a varied mix. It's not a single answer. It's not even a handful of answers. It's hundreds and thousands of answers. The idea is, as human, we understand these variances. As for the technology we have in handling the data, we ask the correct questions, knowing the answer we want, and they can facilitate our functionality of deriving the best way of getting to those people. Hence the answer before the question. If we know what we're looking for, of who we're targeting for, why we're targeting them for, then the usage of these tools becomes much more fluid. The means of reporting is affirmational or confirmational, okay? Whether it's doing or not doing, because everything shifts as well. Just as soon as we think we understand what we're looking for, those modalities change as well. Our markets change. Just ask any hotel that was built for a business that was surrounding it, and that business goes away. That hotel has a new identity it has to find. It's a constant changing functionality we have in our marketing strategies. Not just the seasonality and the durability of the product, but also the degradation of the product before renovations and so forth. All of those have that amazing mix of demand that we have to deal with every year, as does our reason for why people travel around us. The ability to use this technology and have the data that we have is best suited in the hands of people that understand the purpose of what we're trying to do. It's not just selling a dollar. It's not just having them buy it. If you sold them a crappy product, they'll never buy it again. You're having diminished value of your product. Eventually, enough people will know you sell crappy products, they're not going to buy from you. So you can't do that. So the idea of just simplicity of revenue generation is not real. I've had an Instagram with many revenue managers when I talk like that, because to them, their whole purpose is in their title. And so they don't see the diminished value of single transactions, maximum ADR, which burns them, and their resort fees and their pet fees and the perpetual daily fees and the parking fees and every other fee that they throw on there as a simple short-term revenue generation, but a diminished value of demand for future guests. Sure, you can stretch it out the higher the demand to market that you have. If you're an ultimate destination, people just have to pay it. Just ask Disney. But the reality of it is, it's a resentful, and expectations go high, satisfaction goes down, and durability of lifetime value diminishes. That was a fire hose there, wasn't it? Anyways, the idea of the topic of today, of talking related to educating the educated, how critical thinking is the next step, is to define this data in ways that people that already feel like they have a grasp of what they're doing for data understand that they need to change how they're looking at the data and the very data that they're looking at. I'm not asking you to ignore the traditional and the comfortable noises. Just ask me about personas. Okay. I'm asking you to expand the value of those numbers as it relates to better numbers and better information that help you understand deeper a conclusion that you already have, which is, what am I doing for whom am I doing it at the best that I'm doing it for? The spirit of hospitality, the purpose of our drive. And saying, am I able to communicate effectively where my guests are for the guests that I've defined from the data that I have in a way that optimizes the ability for them to purchase with me and have a long-term relationship that means they will continue to purchase with me. That scope of perspective when it comes to critical thinking is what I feel is the next generational value of what we're doing. That is where we need to go. So as we improve upon our reporting process, for those that need these certain numbers to feel placated, that they understand the concept of what's going on, and as we digest more and more volumes of data and our usage of that data, we have to have the end goal in mind, which is the critical thinking process, which is, to my mind, the next step of progression as to what do we do with what we have in the way that we can use it. The technologies of PMAX and things like this are similarities of implementation. I don't like PMAX, but the ability for it to create multidimensional ad campaigns on multiple channels that it has access to is profoundly fast. It's helpful, but you still need a human touch on it to make sure that it's relevant, as it uses AI image generation, AI video generation, AI content generation, and its absurdity is as to what goals you give it. It's simple go fetch mentality is destructive. Just ask brands. They'll start selling another product, even though it's telling you it's selling you for this product. We see that all the time. So that's my idea of critical thinking. That's my idea when I say educating the educated, that critical thinking is truly the next step. So with that, I thank you so very much for the privilege of your time. Thank you, everyone that is watching me live on all the channels that you do, all of our social media channels, as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, all of our TV station. We do our podcast, our audio podcast, a little shorter version of what we have today, but not for the same topic. We do recap the live show on our podcast, but we talk more granularly about tools and functionalities and usabilities of those tools. It relates to certain things. And one of the tools we're going to be talking about today is directly related to how to use it to generate usable data on a non-report level basis. It's a pretty cool tool that does notification processes. So it lets you know when you've set up variable parameters. If you've gone astray of those variable parameters, the bumpers, it'll send a notification saying, hey, your pace is above, below, whatever you've indicated to send you a notification for. It's pretty cool platform called Jepto. Anyways, so for everyone that's watching us live, thank you so much for the privilege of your time today. For those of us that watch us on the recast, we do 11:30 a.m. Sydney, Australian, and London, UK time. Thank you for watching us then. And until next week, show number 451, I'm Lauren Gray, and I look forward to talking to you all next week.